Hi everybody, I'm Bill Sharp, St. Andrews class of 68, and welcome to the Rocks and Razorbacks podcast. Here, we feature conversations with remarkable alumni, teachers, and administrators from both Middleton and St. Andrews high schools. This is a great way to share meaningful stories and keep our memories alive of growing up in West Ashley. Now for today's show.
With me today, Bob Olson from the Charleston County School District. And Bob, you have an incredible history with St. Andrews and Middleton and West Ashley High. Thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Great. Now, I know you prepare sometimes to give certain special presentations. That includes the history of St. Andrews. Can you give us the nickel version of what you present when you have the opportunity?
Yeah, St. Andrews was started way back, it was 60 years ago when West Ashley High was formed, and it was started as a small school. It was referred to in many cases as the Little Brown Schoolhouse. It was a small school, and gradually over the years expanded in grades and expanded in size. Eventually was moved to 721 Wapu Road, where it sat for a number of years, and eventually expanded up till the 12th grade and became St. Andrews High School. And they built St. Andrews Elementary School. Of course, St. Andrews High School were the Rocks, and St. Andrews Elementary School were the Pebbles. And then there was St. Andrews Junior High School, which was on William Kennedy Drive, which later became Middleton High School. That school existed for 60 years, 30 years by itself, and then after it was open for 30 years, the school had grown in size, and the decision was made to split the school and convert St. Andrews Junior High School into a high school, and that was the birth of Middleton High School 30 years after St. Andrews High School. So it was interesting that St. Andrews High School was open for 30 years, then Middleton High School was open for 30 years, and then 30 years later, West Ashley High School opened. So every 30 years, there was a major occurrence happening in the schools in the West Ashley area of Charleston.
And you arrived in Middleton around the mid to late 70s.
1977, right. Came down from Rockford, Illinois. Was hired by Jerry Waters, which is kind of strange that an athletic director would hire a teacher or a coach. I was hired over the telephone, which is also strange. I'd never met Jerry. I remember I got home from work. I was working in a mill back in my hometown during the summertime, and got home at 6 in the morning from my 6 at night to 6 in the morning shift. My mom said a man had called from West Virginia, and she showed me a card with a name on it, and I said I didn't know anybody from West Virginia, and I couldn't figure out why anybody would call me from West Virginia. And she said, well, he was from Charleston. And I said, I don't know anybody from Charleston, West Virginia. She said, well, here's his name and number. So I called the name and number, and it was Jerry Waters from Charleston, South Carolina. I've been to South Carolina one time in my life, been to Charleston for about an hour and a half. And I had not talked to Jerry or anybody in the school. Had talked to a fellow by the name of Robert Norred in the district office, which at that time was at 3 Chisholm Street, which is now condominiums down off of Broad Street. But I met with Robert Norred, and then drove back up to Myrtle Beach, where my friends had driven down with me, and we were staying in a hotel up there, and then drove back home and didn't think anything of it. And hence I got a call from Jerry. He had gotten good information on me, and they were looking for an assistant football coach and a head wrestling coach. And hung up the phone. My mom said, well, who was that? And I said, Jerry Waters. And she said, from West Virginia? I said, no, from South Carolina. And she said, well, what do you want? And I said, well, he wants to hire me as a assistant football and head wrestling coach. He said, but you don't know anything about wrestling. I said, I told him that, but he said that didn't matter. And she said, what are you going to teach? And he said, well, we'll figure that out later. And she said, that's kind of weird, isn't it? And I said, well, I don't know, Mom, I don't have a job. And she said, well, what'd you tell him? I said, well, I told him I'd take the job. And she was kind of surprised. She said, why would you tell him? You've never met this man. You've been to South Carolina once in your life. It's 1,000 miles away. You don't know anybody. She said, so when is this supposed to take place? I said, well, it's Tuesday. I have to be down there Sunday. So, of course, she's freaking out. I'm trying to get my stuff together, so I'm going to U-Haul, picking up a trailer, going to work, putting in my resignation at work, packing up my stuff in the back of a U-Haul, putting a hitch on my car, and off I go to South Carolina. So that's how I got here.
What were your first impressions those first weeks?
It was kind of interesting because I got here. I remember I stayed at the Charleston Inn, which was downtown. I thought it was going to be a nice hotel, but it was really a dump. It was a dump. I got to the front desk and I spent the night there, and then I got up in the morning and asked them if they knew where middle and high was. The people at the front desk didn't have any idea where middle and high was, so I started asking around, and somebody had heard of it, so they said, yeah, you go out 61. So I drove out 61, and I got to Sam Rittenberg and 61. At that time, it was a four-way stop, to show you how things have changed. Stopped at the gas station, and the guy said, yeah, you go up a couple of blocks and turn right, and it's back up in there. So I went up a couple blocks and turned right and went back in there, and there was a little school back there, and I thought, this can't be a high school, because the school I went to was a typical Midwestern high school. We had 3,000 students in it, 3 grades, so there were 1,000 kids in each school. We had a swimming pool, we had 2 gyms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So here looks this little dinky school back in the woods back there, and everything was locked up. So I kind of walked around, and I could hear some noise back in the gym. So I went in the gym, and there were some guys back there playing basketball, and one man. Well, I walked in, and the man saw me, so he told everybody to, let's take 5. Walked over to me and introduced himself, and that was Jerry Waters. So that's how I met Jerry Waters, and he welcomed me, and after practice he said, well, let's go back to my house. He asked me where I was staying, and I told him. He said, you don't want to stay there. He said, come stay with me. So basically took me home, and I lived with Jerry for a couple of weeks until I could find a place to live in Charleston.
And his wife took it in stride?
Yeah, she was fine. I mean, she kind of looked funny when he told her I was going to stay with them, but she was fine. And basically, they were wonderful. They basically adopted me the first year I lived here in Charleston. And I thought that would continue, and lo and behold, Jerry left after the first year, and he took a position as the athletic director and basketball coach at University of Sewanee in Tennessee. So I lost my South Carolina father after 1 year. So that was kind of disappointing or discouraging. But Jerry was really a great person.
Did you learn when you got to Charleston and the Middleton about the state championships?
Oh yes, no. Everybody. As soon as I got there, everybody told me about Jerry. I mean, that was very obvious that they were a great basketball powerhouse and all that, which surprised me because the gym was so small, and I mean, probably had 5 or 6 rows of bleachers in it, which again, I was used to big facilities and different things, but no, Jerry was a legend in South Carolina, so that was not a surprise, and of course, knowing Jerry, he would never brag about anything, so if you just meet him on the street, you wouldn't expect that, but Jerry was Jerry. Well, got there, had a day of practice, and then we took off to North Carolina for a football camp, which I had never been exposed to before. I mean, I played football all the way through. In Illinois, we were not allowed to go to football camps or anything, so that was a new experience for me. So we went to Laurinburg, North Carolina for a week for football camp, and then came back to Charleston. So that was a totally new experience for me.
To jump ahead, can you imagine all these years later we're sitting here and we're talking about that school and how much it means to so many people?
Oh no, and see the thing is that was a very, very good school. I mean, the facilities were terrible, but everybody in that school was so close together and so tight. It was a wonderful school. It was a great school to work at. That first year I actually taught at Wallace Middle School, and then I coached at the high school. But that school was a great school to work at. And the teachers, it hadn't been open that long, because I think they opened maybe in 70, 71, right around in there. So it was relatively just building, but there was such a bonding of the people that were there, and the kids were so tight. That was a wonderful place to work at. And the kids enjoyed going to that school. I mean, the facilities were terrible, but that really didn't matter to anybody. It was a great school. coaches did a lot of work around the school in the summertime, but knocked a hole in the wall between two classrooms so you didn't have to go out in the hall to get to the other part of the library. But the library was 2 classrooms upstairs. Eventually, much later on, they built an addition on the back, so they had an actual media center or library. And the area behind the school was just a half a field, and the coaches and the people at the school, we actually cut down trees, and we actually cleared that out ourselves so that we could have a full-size football field back there. And I remember it was so funny because I remember the first time I drove in there after I got the job, when it came on early in the morning, I remember driving the parking lot and I thought, oh boy, I'm driving into enemy territory because I had been a Middleton, diehard Middleton person. Of course, we were our arch rivals to St. Andrews, and here I am driving in as the principal of the arch rival. So I drove in that morning. I think it was maybe a Friday morning, and pulled up and nobody was there. And I went to the front door and the front door was locked, and went around and all the doors were locked. And I thought, this is strange. We were at 2-3 weeks before school starts and the building's locked up. And finally found a custodian, and he kind of let me in, and I told him who I was, and he just kind of looked at me like, oh, okay. And then found out that they had taken that Friday off or whatever, and they'd all be back in Monday. So I thought, okay, here we are 2 weeks before school starts and nobody's here. So then Monday came around and met everybody, and like I say, and St. Andrews ended up being a wonderful place to work too. People there were great. The people that were in the office, they were with me for 16 years.
16 years. Yeah. Wow. Well, what do you think the reasoning is that it just between the people and the chemistry?
We just had a good team, good relationship. And they had gone through some issues at St. Andrews. They had fired the bookkeeper, so the bookkeeper was brand new. Community school director before was David Parler, and David had left to do an internship as an assistant principal at Middleton. So the guy that was there was Carl Goldner. So of course Carl was fairly new to the job, and he ended up staying, and he stayed with me the whole time. Jan Atkinson, that was my secretary. She was there the whole time with me.
And during your tenure, you probably witnessed some pretty amazing students becoming young people and going on into amazing careers.
Yeah.
Anybody come to mind?
Yeah. No, we had several. We had several athletes, of course, that graduated from St. Andrews that went on. Probably the one that everybody knows of in the community would be Katrina McLean. And I mean, Katrina went on, and she had 3 or 4 Olympics, several gold medals. Came back and actually donated one of her gold medal jerseys to the school, which we had framed up and put in the hall. We had her high school jersey that was framed in the hallway. Kenneth Robinson. Now Kenneth was there before. He was actually played at St. Andrews when I coached at Middleton, but Kenneth went to be one of the captains at Carolina when Joe Morrison was there, Black Magic days, and went on and played with the Washington Redskins for a couple of years. And it's interesting, Kenneth now, Kenneth lives I think he's still in Nashville, and he's an assistant headmaster at a academy up there now. So Kenny's doing really well. I call him Gussie, but Kenneth's doing really well, last I heard. Had another girl, Jade Smalls, her name was. She was one of our student body presidents, Jade Simmons now. Jade was a very talented piano player. It was funny, I remember we had a Black History Month was always kind of a interesting month at our school. Our school was 50-50 black-white. It always seemed kind of tense that time of year. And we also had an assembly, which I was kind of anxious about, because if you got a speaker in that was saying the wrong things, you get people upset. And one year we had a speaker that got everybody all upset, both sides. So the kids decided they didn't want to have a speaker anymore. They just wanted to do the assembly themselves. So the next year we had an assembly at the school in the gym with all 1,500 kids in the gym or whatever. So that's kind of a lot of kids to get in the gym for an assembly that I didn't know what they were going to do. And all of a sudden they rolled this little piano out in the middle of the floor, and I thought, oh, this isn't good. And a little black girl walks out on the floor, and she starts playing the piano. It's like, oh my God, just unbelievable, playing the piano. Well, she ended up being a world-renowned pianist. She was runner-up for Miss America, I think in 1993, got a full scholarship to Northwestern, and now she's a world-known speaker and pianist, lives down in Houston, Jade Simmons. And if you Google her now, you just Google her site, you can see her, but she was our student body president her senior year. A lot of kids that did very well that came out of St. Andrews, and of course Middleton had some good kids too. Of course, Darius Rucker, and I remember Darius when he was in middle school and then also at Middleton. And of course, most people know Darius, Hootie and the Blowfish. Speaker of the House for South Carolina was Bobby Harrell. The bridge that you drive across every day to go to Mount Pleasant is Arthur Ravenel. And of course, Arthur's a graduate of St. Andrews, as was his son, Thomas. Thomas was a good athlete at St. Andrews. So those that watch Southern Charm, Thomas was on that show earlier years.
Neal, did you ever work on Southern Charm?
Yes, I did, unfortunately. I actually helped reshoot the sizzle reel when they pitched it to Bravo. So I worked with Thomas and all those guys.
Okay. So I mean, but there's
He's worked with Darius too.
Yeah. So I mean, there's been a lot of, I'm sure I'm leaving some off, but there's probably the one that kind of slipped under the radar was when I coached wrestling. We had a lot of good kids. Wally Burbage, Mark Judy, both those kids went to Citadel. And
Paul Witten.
Paul.
Yeah.
Paul.
Good friend of mine. Yeah.
Yeah, they had a lot of good kids. Alan Wilson was probably, I think Alan might have been my first state champ. But I had a lot of good kids. And then we had one that kind of flew under the radar. His older brother Neal was a good wrestler, Neal Tisdale. But John was a younger brother, and John wasn't really a good wrestler, but John was very smart. And then John kind of disappeared, and then John reappeared. John went to the College of Charleston, and then John reappeared one night. I was watching 60 Minutes, and John has found a cure for sickle cell. And 60 Minutes was doing a big show on the cure for sickle cell, and John was the featured
scientist.
Yes, yeah. And if you Google John Tisdale, sickle cell, you'll see John is the main person on that. Now he lives up in the Washington D.C. area. You wouldn't know, and John was such a quiet kid that he would never brag about that. But to me, that's amazing.
Yeah, both schools in that era turning out so many amazing people. Yeah. And it's like that's part of the story.
Yeah, Josh Strickland. Josh was a tremendous voice in school, and Josh went on to be he played Tarzan on Broadway on the show Tarzan, and he's still in the entertainment field now. If you watch the Christmas shows downtown Charleston, Tiffany Parker, who used to be the lead in a lot of our plays at St. Andrews, she's one of the singers in the Brad Morantz shows down there. She's an attorney here in town now, but just all kinds of neat kids went to both schools.
So the question is, why? Why? It's such a small community, and sometimes we think of West Ashley as like the redheaded stepchild to Charleston County and Mount Pleasant. But here we are with some amazing people coming in this small, limited area from these two schools.
I don't know. They are, though. No, and like I'm saying, and the more you think, I mean, as I'm just sitting here thinking, Terrell Everett, that's probably the best basketball player I had as a student. And Terrell played at Oklahoma.
And so when it comes to St. Andrews splitting and becoming St. Andrews and Middleton High, what was the reasoning behind that?
Well, I got a chance to talk to John Halfacre, and John was the first principal of Middleton High School, and John was an assistant principal at St. Andrews, and according to John, there wasn't a whole lot of thought put into anything. I mean, he was basically just called over to CE's office, which is that little building in front of the school, and he was just told, we made the decision, we're going to open the junior high as a high school next year. This is in the spring, and you're going to be the principal.
Wow, that's short notice.
And you figure it out. We don't care what you do, but you figure it out. So because I was trying to figure out how to do things. So I said, well, how'd you do this? How'd you do that? And I said, well, how'd you come up with the nickname? And he said, well, that was easy. I said, well, how was it easy? He said, well, I'm an Arkansas fan, so it was Razorbacks. And I said, well, how'd you come up with the color? He says, that was easy. I said, red for Arkansas. He said, yep. And I said, where'd the gold come from? He said, well, St. Andrews was blue and gold, so I took the gold from St. Andrews, so that was red and gold. So that's how they came up with the red and the gold.
So is it an urban legend that Middleton was going to be the Magnolias?
He said that was one thing that they preferred, that it be named after one of the gardens. And he said, you can't name it after Magnolia Plantation. So it was going to be Middleton, you know. And there was, I don't know if it was true or not, but he said the rumors were floating around that it was going to be the Magnolia Haim Blossoms. And of course, you can imagine that St. Andrews people were just, you know,
hoping for that.
And the poor kids that were going to go to Middleton were just groveling and thinking, oh my God, I'm going to be a blossom. But
yeah,
and then
of course, your helmet.
Yeah, of course. But then when it came out Middleton Razorbacks, everybody's overjoyed. So whether or not that was true or not, I don't know. But that was something that John said. And John wouldn't admit to me that he started rumors or anything else, but that was something that he just said that was kind of out there. And he said, I'm not going to tell you if that was true or not, but he said that was kind of out there. So he said everybody was thrilled when it came out Middleton Razorbacks.
We are too.
Yes.
Neal and I agree.
Yeah.
Racial relations in the schools, and maybe what you've witnessed or seen, your opinions and thoughts without me trying to lean you in any type of direction.
The thing I've noticed about kids are kids hang around with kids that have their same likes. And when people, because I remember people used to come in the cafeteria and say, well, look at your kids are segregated. And I said, what do you mean by that? And they said, well, the black kids sit over here, all the white kids sit over there. And I said, well, that's not necessarily true. It may be, but I don't know if it is, because really, if you look over here, some of those kids are mixed over there. And they say, well, why is that true? I said, because those kids go to class with each other. And those kids that sit over there, those kids go to class with each other. So why would those kids that sit over there, why would they sit with those kids over there? Because they have nothing in common with those kids over there. They don't go to class with them. They don't have the same interests they have. So why would they sit with them? I mean, you stop and think about it. They have nothing in common with them. I mean, they don't look alike, but that has nothing to do with why they're not sitting together. It has to do with what interests they have.
Let's go with the Middleton St. Andrews story of their merger. Okay. What can you tell me about that?
Basically, both schools were kind of going down size-wise, and both buildings were having issues. And the issues were getting to be where the issues were not fixable. Where it got to be where the district was looking at it saying, you know, especially Middleton, there wasn't a whole lot you could really do with that building. You were going to have to knock it down. And the same with St. Andrews. I mean, St. Andrews High School was a relatively newer building, but it was built relatively quickly. And also with the way buildings are built now and the needs that buildings have with technology and different things, they're really, you really had to ask yourself, are these buildings really worth putting a lot of money into for a high school? Because a high school, you want it to be, you know, you just don't want a room for kids to sit in and listen to somebody talk to them.
Right.
So the question was, do we really want to put a lot of money into these buildings? There's no parking. There's not enough space for the buildings. Neither one of them has an auditorium. Neither one of them has the facilities that they need. The growth West Ashley is going out. So the decision was and also, do we want to have a split community? And also coming into play, to be honest with you, you'd have a have school and a have not school. And it wasn't just in the high school, it was in the middle schools, and it was in the elementary schools. Or would it be better just to put everything into one school and unite the community? Like Mount Pleasant. Mount Pleasant at the time was one high school, Wando High School, where the community all was behind one school and it was all together. So that was the decision that had to be made, and the board decided they wanted to put them together and have one high school. And that was a board decision. That wasn't a community decision. That was a board decision.
Was there thinking, I'm thinking, from what I know, the answer is yes to some degree. Was there some thought given to how to tip your hat or give a nod to St. Andrews and Middleton going away as West Ashley High?
There was some discussion about that, and it was there really wasn't, because the one thing that everybody wanted, they did not want to have fighting, because they saw fighting happen with other mergers locally in other places, and they didn't want to have people at each other. And they knew that if they were going to start talking about naming it St. Andrews or naming it Middleton, that would exist. And they also knew that a lot of the Middleton parents were graduates of what school? St. Andrews. And that was another factor that came into play. And a lot of the kids didn't realize that their parents, there was no Middleton when their parents grew up. If they grew up in Charleston, the kids that went to Middleton, their parents in many cases were St. Andrews graduates. So it was really a tough issue, and everybody that came to the table, because we had committees for naming the school, we had committees for school colors, we had committees for mascot, we had all kinds of committees. And that was probably one of the easier ones, was naming the school, because everybody agreed that it would not be a good idea to name the school St. Andrews or to name the school Middleton, because there would be hard feelings no matter what you did. So that's where the decision was made to name it West Ashley, because that way everybody knew where it was, and there would be no upset people about you called it the wrong name or you called it the wrong school. So that was an easy answer from the committee standpoint. And when they presented, and the people that actually vote on the name are the school board members, and that was an easy sell to the school board members. There was no debate about that. I think they were probably relieved about that. I think they would have been probably some angst if the committee would have sent forward St. Andrews High School, if they would have sent forward Middleton High School.
Tell us about the front of West Ashley High.
They wanted the new high school to reflect some of the history of the West Ashley schools. And the original St. Andrews, not the original St. Andrews High School, but the St. Andrews High School that was built, or the high school that was built, had big pillars in the front. And that was before the school burned down. The school was burned down in the late 70s. So when the new school was built, that was one of the things that they asked the architects to keep that. My biggest thing with the teachers that I had to face right away is you had teachers at both schools had been there for a long time. And biggest thing, and I leaned hard on, talked a lot with Floyd Hyatt. Floyd was the principal at James Island, and James Island had merged Fort Johnson and James Island together, and talked to a couple other principals. And the thing I got out of them is to pick your leadership people first. So basically what I decided to do was to pick department heads first. So as soon as I was named the principal, which was about 2-3 years before the school actually opened, I picked department heads, because we had probably about 20 English teachers, 10 at each school. And I also found out some things that weren't so easy to deal with. They weren't using the same books. They weren't using the same curriculum, which I thought was strange. You had schools that were, 3 miles apart in the same school district that weren't using the same curriculum. And I thought, that's going to be we need to work on that. So basically, we interviewed and we named department heads. And then the departments started meeting together as departments, with teachers from both schools meeting with the department head. And then they worked out what needed to be done. And my position was, I'm not an English major, I'm not a science major, I'm not a math major. I'm dependent on you as the department head to help to make the right decisions, not you as a person, but as a department. So if you're the department head coming from Middleton, I'm expecting you to work with the teachers from Middleton and St. Andrews to work together as a team and come up with the right solution. And that's basically what I did with the whole school, and that's how you built a team, was get those people together. So when we had department meetings, they weren't Middleton department and St. Andrews department. It was West Ashley department. Even though the two schools were still separate, they met together as one.
How's West Ashley doing now? Is it growing? Is it shrinking?
They're actually going up. When we opened, I think maybe the second year we opened, we were the largest high school in Charleston. We were larger than Wandell.
Do you think our community here deserves some sort of something with a roof over its head that honors St. Andrews and Middleton accomplishments, people, memorabilia, awards, trophies?
I think that would be great. The issue would be funding it and having the funds to keep it going, because it's not something that you could just put up and it would sit by itself. I mean, that would be great, but again, you'd have to have the funding to keep it going, because a building doesn't stand up by itself. You know, you got to pay for the air conditioning and whatever to keep it going. But I think that would be a great idea, because unfortunately, you talk about things now, and kids have no idea. Kids have no idea what was there in the past, and I think that's sad in some respects. They have no idea what happened.
Our journey with this documentary, is to try to figure it out.
Yeah.
What can we do to keep it alive?
Yeah, well, if they do the museum, if they really want to keep it true to Middleton, they just don't put air conditioning in it.
Yeah. bring in the box fans from Kmart.
Exactly.
Thanks for watching today's episode, and be on the lookout for additional episodes. If you'd like to be a guest or even a host in the Rocks and Razorbacks podcast, please let us know. We want the podcast to be the go-to place for cherished Middleton and St. Andrews memories. Don't forget, the Rocks and Razorbacks documentary geared for South Carolina ETV is in production, and we'd love your input and help with that as well. For now, go Rocks and, go Hogs. Well, you get it. Thanks.